Hello and welcome to Chapter 13 of the OpenStax Psychology textbook. My name is Matthew Poole, and today we are going over Industrial Organizational Psychology. And for short, we will refer to it as IO psychology. So, what is Industrial Organizational Psychology, or IO Psych? It is a branch of psychology that studies how human behavior and psychology affect work and how they are affected by work. So, where do IO psychologists work? What environment do they work in? Well, they can work in a number of different areas. They can work in academia, they can work in government, they can consult firms, as well as business. So, when it comes to the distinction between industrial versus organizational psychology, industrial psychology studies job characteristics, applicant characteristics, and how to match them, as well as studies employee training and performance appraisal. So, their main focus is on hiring as well as maintaining employees, whereas organizational psychology studies the interactions between people working in organizations and effects of those interactions on productivity. So they're more so interested in worker satisfaction, motivation and commitment, management and leadership styles, social norms, and role expectations. So when you put them together, psychologists, they work on both of these entities. Okay, when it comes to the areas of industrial organizational psychology, let's overview a category known as human factor psychology. This studies how workers interact with the tools of work and how to design those tools to optimize workers' productivity, safety, and health. This is known as ergonomics in Europe, aka tools of work can include interaction with a machine, workstation, information displays, and the local environment, aka for example, lighting. So let's look at the historical development of IO Psych. Well, in the early 20th century, we have a few figures that I want us to focus on. James Cattell, Hugo Munsterberg, as well as Walter Dill Scott. These were students of Wilhelm Wundt, who, if you know about psychology from the first chapter, we learn that Wilhelm Wundt is considered the father of psychology, and he had a student, William Titchener. They both looked at and tried to understand the human experience by looking into consciousness, and they created their school of thought known as structuralism. Well, these students, what they did is founded a few different ideologies. So Cattell founded the Psychological Corporation, a psychological consulting company. Munsterberg published Psychology and Industrial Efficiency in 1913, which covered employee selection, employee training, as well as effective advertising. Where Walter Dill Scott, he was one of the first psychologists to apply psychology to advertising, management, and personal selection. Now, during the World War I era, Robert Yerkes, he organized a group that developed methods for screening and selecting enlisted men. So he developed the Army Alpha Test to measure mental abilities. Okay, and Scott and Walter Bingham, they organized a group with the goal to develop selection methods for officers. So the more you know. Okay, continuing with his historical development, we've got Elton Mayo. He conducted studies at Western Electric's Hawthorne's work from 1929 to 1932. He explored interpersonal relations, motivation, and organizational dynamic, as well as examining how human interaction factors enhanced or decreased productivity. So this is ultimately the origin of organizational psychology, and researchers reported that any changes they made to variables resulted in increased productivity. Okay, we have to talk about the Hawthorne effect whenever we refer to IO psychology. You may look into this particular effect in sociology. So years after the Mayo study, researchers analyzed the results and noticed that employees performed better when researchers or supervisors observed and interacted with them. So this is a bias that we have to be aware of whenever we're conducting research, because within the Hawthorne effect, this is whenever there's an increase in performance of the individuals who are noticed, watched, and paid attention to by researchers or supervisors, as I just mentioned. So whenever you realize and you know you're being watched by somebody who is over you or who is looking into your performance and how you behave, has a significant chance of being altered and ultimately in the direction of what potentially you think the researcher or the supervisor wants. So this is whenever you know your boss is watching you, you know you're going to be in tip-top shape and you're going to work harder than you normally do or try and do things by the book and take no shortcuts. This is known as the Hawthorne effect. Okay, let's look into a little bit of more historical development with Kurt Lewin as well as Frederick Taylor. So in the 1930s, Lewin researched effects of leadership styles, team structure, and team dynamics. He coined the term group dynamics. So if you've wondered where that term comes from, you can thank Kurt Lewin. Frederick Taylor, in 1911, he strived to engineer workplaces to increase productivity. Okay, so he created the textbook known as The Principles of Scientific Management, which examined management styles, personnel selection, and training. Now, Lillian Gilbreth, the mother of modern management, what she did was she strived to find ways to increase productivity as well, but more so specifically, she studied efficiency improvements that reduce the number of motions required to perform a task and were applicable in the workplace, home, and in other areas. So she was credited with the idea of putting shelves on the inside of refrigerator doors and foot pedal operated garbage cans. Okay, so making sure that we are optimizing as well as utilizing less movement, utilizing the foot pedal operated garbage cans. I can definitely thank Lillian Gilbreth for, because I utilize one on a daily basis. Thank you so much. She investigated employee fatigue and time management stress and found many employees were motivated by money and job satisfaction. Who would have thought more money and more autonomy, more say-so over your job would lead to a better mindset when it comes to your employment. Okay, industrial psychology is what we're going to focus on next. The selecting and evaluating of employees. So this includes topics such as candidate analysis and testing, interviews, training, bias and protection in hiring, the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity, and the Americans with Disabilities Act. Okay, so when it comes to selecting employees, job advertising, job analysis is integral because this is you want to make sure that you're accurately describing the job and task that is going to be performed. You want to make sure that that is congruent with what the person is actually going to be doing. We've got task-oriented and worker-oriented, where task-oriented quite simply lists in detail the tasks that will be performed for the job, whereas worker-oriented includes describing the characteristics required of the worker to successfully perform the job. Okay. Now, when it comes to candidate analysis and testing, this can involve testing, interviews, and work samples or exercises. Personality tests can be used to identify personality characteristics of the candidate and match those personality characteristics that would ensure good performance on the job. Other tests can include IQ tests, integrity tests, and physical tests such as drug tests or physical fitness tests. When it comes to the interviews can be influenced by social factors and body language, such as the degree of the similarity of the applicant to the interview and nonverbal behaviors. There are so many subtleties when it comes to an interview that, when made aware of, can really make the impact on a good interview versus a bad interview or just a mundane interview. And research finds that the lack of eye contact and smiling lead to lower applicant ratings. So the next time you go in for an interview, try to make sure to maintain natural eye contact longer than maybe you normally would if you have the tendency to look away and have difficulty looking people in the eye, as well as smiling. Everybody loves to, and we naturally have the tendency to view people in a different light if they bring about a positive overall attitude, and smiling definitely influences that perspective. Now, when it comes to the interview as a whole, you can experience one of the two typically: an unstructured interview where there are different questions for different candidates. Questions are usually unspecified beforehand. Now, most of the time, you're probably going to go through a structured interview where it's the same questions for every candidate that comes to that interview. The questions are prepared in advance. There's a standardized rating system for each response, and they're more effective at predicting subsequent job performance of the job candidate. Now, when it comes to training, once we've gone through the interview, there's usually going to be what's known as an orientation. This is when the training usually begins with an orientation period during which a new employee learns about the company policies, practices, and culture. Just the basic, what you need to know about us. Okay. Next is the mentoring. This is experienced employee guides that guides the work of a new employee, pardon me. And a lot of times you are assigned an individual who has been there for a period of time, and they're there to show you the ropes. Mentors may be formally assigned or develop informally. So somebody may be assigned to you initially, or you just naturally tend to latch on to an individual who guides you and makes the process of being a new employee a lot easier. Now, when it comes to the research of mentoring positively affected proteges' compensation and the number of promotions compared with a non-mentored employees. So there's legitimacy to having a mentor. This can impact your overall long-term, what you get paid, and maybe how you progress throughout the company and how quickly you rise within the company. And proteges were more satisfied with their careers and had greater job satisfaction. So if you are somebody who stumbled upon this, you've got a business and you're considering employing a mentorship program, it is associated with a lot of great factors that I think you should consider. Job satisfaction as well as more satisfied careers overall. Next, let's look at evaluating employees. Industrial organizational psychologists are often involved in designing performance appraisal systems for organizations. So their aim is to make evaluations as fair and positive as possible to decrease subjectivity or your own bias, the human bias. So when it comes to performance appraisal, this is an evaluation of an employee's success or lack of success at performing the duties of the job. This is often used to motivate employees to improve performance and expand areas of competence. So let's look at the 350-degree feedback appraisal. Firstly, supervisors, customers, direct reports, peers, and the employee himself rate employees' performance. That's one factor. Secondly, provides different perspectives of employees' job performance. And thirdly, the thing is they often fail, though, to accomplish their purpose because they are used incorrectly. So that's some of the difficulties that one of the difficulties with this 350-degree feedback appraisal. When it comes to bias and protection in hiring, this is absolutely integral. When selecting candidates based on group membership, when it does not directly affect the potential job performance, is discriminatory. So I want to read that again for it to stick. Selecting candidates based on group membership when it does not directly affect potential job performance is discriminatory. There are many laws exist to prevent hiring based on various group membership criteria. Be it due to pregnancy, religion, and age are some of the criteria on which hiring decisions cannot legally be made. As well, something that may serve you in the future to know is that it is illegal for a potential employer to know your age. Just an FYI, if they do that, that is not legal. Okay, so next is the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity, otherwise known as the EEOC. It is responsible for enforcing federal laws that make it illegal to discriminate against a job applicant or an employee because of the person's race, color, religion, sex, national origin, age, disability, creed, or genetic information. So all of those are protected for you as a potential employee, because it is illegal for companies to discriminate based on those criteria. So it is important to know your rights, and I encourage you to pause the video and take a look at the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Age Discrimination Employment Act of 1967, as well as Titles I and V of the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, aka ADA. Now, as a quick summary, though, I do want to go through a few of these that are covered for you. The Equal Pay Act requires equal pay for men and women in the same workplace who are performing equal work. So you cannot discriminate for pay based on one's gender. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act in 1964 makes it illegal to treat individuals unfavorably because of their race or color of their skin. In 1978, we've got the Pregnancy Discrimination Act. This prohibits job discrimination of a woman because she is pregnant as long as she can perform the work required. When it comes to the Americans with Disability Act, this is where employers cannot discriminate against any individual based on a disability. And to define a disability, it is a physical or mental impairment that limits one or more major life activities such as hearing, walking, and breathing. It has been expanded to include individuals with alcoholism, former drug use, obesity, or psychiatric disabilities. So this is something that is important to note for you as an employee and your rights. Next is the bona fide occupational qualification. This is a requirement of certain occupations for which denying an individual employment would otherwise violate the law, such as requirements concerning religion or sex. In some cases, religion, national origin, age, and sex are bona fide occupational qualifications. All right. When it comes to organizational psychology, some of the things that we're going to talk about include the social dimension of work, job satisfaction, work-family balance, which is absolutely integral, management and organizational structure, goals, teamwork and work teams, organizational culture, and violence in the workplace. So let's start with job satisfaction, something that's absolutely integral. Results from how we think about our work, cognition, and how we feel about our work are the affect. Okay, so when we're talking about our thoughts about work, again, throughout this course, I refer to thoughts, aka thinking, and how we feel is the affect. It's influenced by the work itself, our personality, and our culture, measured using questionnaires that employees complete, and can be measured at a global level or at the level of specific factors. So here are some things that are associated with job satisfaction. Autonomy. Obviously, having natural responsibility and control over decisions allows you to not feel like you are micromanaged, feeling like you do have say-so in what happens within your role and what happens with the company as a result. So having individual responsibility and the control over the decisions that you make is associated with higher job satisfaction. Now, where I'm a college teacher, I have a lot of autonomy within my classroom. I don't know that I would last as long as a high school teacher where a lot of their curriculum is controlled. They don't have a lot of say-so over what they teach, and they have to meet particular standards. So that's the main difference between college versus high school. Of course, in college we have, a general rubric in which we follow, but a lot of the autonomy I have a lot more autonomy than if I were in a high school setting. I feel like I would have a higher burnout rate if I transitioned to the high school setting. Next is work content. If one has a variety, they have challenge, role clarity. This is mostly strongly predictive of overall job satisfaction, just work content in general. When it comes to communication, feedback, it's always so nice to get the feedback on maybe areas for improvement or what you're doing correct. Communication and high communication is key for job satisfaction. Financial rewards, we will never turn that down, right? Salary and benefits are crucial. Weak correlation, but it is a weak correlation with job satisfaction. So here's the thing though, although we do love it and we appreciate it whenever we get an increase, typically we tend to get adjusted relatively quickly when it comes to the salary that we get, even whenever we have bonuses. Lifestyle inflation is a thing, and the more we make, some people have the tendency to fall victim to this um, lifestyle inflation where we make more, but then we spend more as a result. Growth and development, personal growth, training, education. Something that's nice about the college setting is that they do have opportunities to continue to advance your training or your education. So if you work for a company that also values that, that is such a nice thing to have. Promotion, career advancement opportunity. Are you in a position that leads to growth, or is it more so a terminal position? That can really make a difference. And so can your coworkers. The professional relationships you have with those. Is it positive? Is it a toxic work environment? Supervision and feedback. Are your supervisors supportive? Do they recognize whenever you do something good? Are they fair, or are they just way too much in the way that they manage you? When it comes to the workload, is there a time pressure? Is it tedious? Um, are you constantly under stress of making sure you meet numbers by a particular week on a weekly basis or on a monthly basis, maybe on a quarterly basis? As well as the work demands. Are there extra work requirements? Are they just so, are the expectations just way more than what is actually manageable? These are all things whenever it comes to job satisfaction that are absolutely integral to keep in mind whenever you're searching for a particular job. When it comes to job stress, this obviously can lead to poor health over time, poor job performance, as well as it impacting your family life. Now, some things that can contribute to job stress include having to fill multiple roles. So whenever you're hired for a position, sometimes they will add on more work, or you're going to have to be kind of like a Swiss Army knife where you fit into different places. You have to fill multiple roles and not just one area. Next is workplace role ambiguity, lack of career progress. Are you more so in a terminal state? No matter how hard you work, you can't seem to advance. A lack of job security definitely can lead to job stress. A lack of control over work outcomes, isolation, work overload, discrimination, harassment, as well as bullying. Next are some threats to job security. This includes downsizing. Of course, employers are always going to look to where they can potentially save money, increase their profit, things like that. So something that may happen is downsizing. This is a process in which an organization tries to achieve greater overall efficiency by reducing the number of employees. IO psychologists may be involved in how the news is delivered and how laid off and retained employees are supported. So some things that can happen as a result to a threat to job security is that what will happen commonly is a corporate merger where there's a joining of two organizations, as well as acquisition. One organization purchases the other. And when this happens, when acquisitions happen, this can often lead to cuts due to the duplication of core function like sales and accounting, human resources, things like that. Now, when it comes to work-family balance, this occurs when people juggle the demands of work life with the demands of family. Do you have a good work-family balance with your job and your home life? So here are three sources of work-family conflicts as identified by Greenhouse and Battelle. Firstly, time devoted to work makes difficult to fulfill requirements of family or vice versa. Strain from participation in work equals to difficulty to fulfill requirements of family. Specific behaviors are required to work difficulty to fulfill requirements of family or vice versa. Ways to decrease work-family conflicts: support in the home, emotional and practical. Does the family support? Practical support it has been found to be the most effective. And workplace support: understanding supervisors are always a benefit to have. Do you have flex time, leave with pay? Can you telecommute? Can you work from home effectively? So, telecommuting is defined by employee's ability to set their own hours, allowing them to work from home at different parts of the day. Okay, let's now talk about management and organizational structure as identified by Douglas McGregor in 1960. Um, so to start with, we're going to talk about scientific management, the theory of management that analyzes and synthesizes workflows with the main objective of improving economic efficiency, especially labor productivity. It identified two different styles of managers. We've got Theory X. The manager assumes the workers are inherently lazy and unproductive. Managers must have control and use punishments. And then there is Theory Y. The manager assumes workers are people who seek to work hard and productively. Managers and workers can find creative solutions to problems. Workers do not need to be controlled and punished. So, which do you see your manager? If you are a manager, do you inherently share one of these two theories of perspective? Okay. Next, under the same category of management and organizational structure with Donald Clifton, he researched how an organization can best use an individual's strengths. We call this strength-based management, the approach that focuses on employees' strengths. Now, Bass in 1985 created two schools of thought known as transactional leadership and transformational leadership. When it comes to transactional leadership, the characteristic of leaders who focus on supervision and organizational goals achieved through a system of rewards and punishment, maintenance of organizational status quo. Whereas transformational leadership is the characteristic of leaders who are firstly charismatic role models, two inspirational, three intellectually stimulating, and four individually considerate and who seek to change the organization. Next, let's talk about some goals, teamwork, and work teams. Let's talk about first some team-based approaches, or at least one in particular. Many companies structure their organization so that that work can be delegated to work teams. And a work team is defined as a group of people within an organization or company given a specific task to achieve together. This brings together diverse skills, experience, and expertise, but do not always deliver greater productivity. Why do some teams work well while others don't? Well, what can happen is what's known as social loafing. We all know of a social loafer. Whenever we're in a group setting and we are trying to complete a task, and we give items for others to accomplish, it always seems that there's a social loafer, somebody who exerts significantly less energy than the rest. Some things that may also contribute to teams not working well includes poor communication, poor decision-making skills due to conformity effects and conflict within the group. And then there's what's known as the team halo effect. Teams are given credit for their success, but individuals within a team are blamed for team failures. Okay, now let's talk about teams and gender diversity, the pros and cons. The cons, firstly, diversity can introduce communication and interpersonal relationship problems. The pros include diversity can increase the team's skill set overall. Now, in 2013, there were a few individuals that founded that gender-balanced teams perform better than predominantly male teams. Which I found fascinating, and did not identify which mechanism accounted for performance improvement. Now, when it comes to types of teams, we have a few that I want to identify. Problem resolution teams, which are created for the purpose of solving a particular problem. Creative teams, used to develop innovative possibilities or solutions that see different solutions to a problem overall. Tactical teams, used to execute a well-defined plan or objective. Now, when it comes to an organizational culture, this is defined as the values, visions, hierarchies, norms, and interactions among its employees, aka how an organization is run, how it operates, and how it makes decisions. Now, in 2003, there were a few individuals that identified three layers in organizational culture. This includes observable artifacts, symbols of language, narratives, and practices that represent the underlying cultural assumptions, espoused values, concepts/beliefs that management or entire organization endorses. And finally, number three, basic assumptions, usually unobservable and unquestioned. And lastly, on this slide, I want to highlight diversity training. This diversity training, which is common among employers, educates participants about cultural differences with the goal of improving teamwork overall. It aims to reduce prejudiced or preconceived notions about a particular group. Next is sexual harassment. Most organizations have developed sexual harassment policies that define harassment and procedures to prevent and address it when it occurs. But to define sexual harassment, this is sexually based behavior that is knowingly unwanted and has an adverse effect on a person's employment status. It interferes with a person's job performance or creates a hostile or intimidating work environment. And here are some of the types of sexual harassment. Quid pro quo. You give something to get something. Organizational rewards are offered in exchange for sexual favors. The threat of withholding a reward if a sexual request is refused. And thirdly, hostile environment sexual harassment. This is where an employee experiences conditions in the workplace considered hostile/intimidating. For example, the environment allowing offensive language or sexually explicit images. Next is violence in the workplace. To define this, workplace violence is the violence or threat of violence against workers, which can occur inside or outside the workplace. Includes physical violence, harassment, intimidation, ranges from threats and verbal abuse to physical assaults and homicide. And some of the warning signs can include intimidating behavior, threats, sabotaging equipment, or radical changes in a coworker's behavior. Finally, feelings of being treated unfairly, unjustly, or disrespectfully are significant triggers. Okay, next let's talk about human factors psychology and workplace design. Now, when it comes to human factor psychology, this studies the integration of the human-machine interface in the workplace. It's concerned with researching and designing machines that fit human requirements and is involved in the development of regulations and principles of test design, often related to safety. So when it comes to these areas of study, firstly attention, which includes vigilance and monitoring, recognizing signals and noise, mental resources, and divided attention. So some questions that are posed is how is attention maintained? What about tasks maintain attention? And how do design systems to support attention? Next is cognitive engineering, includes human software interactions and complex automated systems, especially decision-making processes of workers as they are supported by the software system. So a question posed is how do workers use and obtain information provided by software? Task analysis, breaking down the elements of a task. Questions posed, how can a task be performed more efficiently and how can a task be performed more safely? And finally, cognitive task analysis, breaking down the elements of a cognitive task. How are decisions made? When it comes to workplace safety, we have to have checklists. They are used to reduce accidents in the workplace. So, for example, pilots are required to go through a detailed checklist of the different parts of the aircraft before takeoff to ensure that all essential equipment is working correctly. And there are time limits on operating equipment. So this limits how long an operator, such as a pilot or a truck driver, is allowed to operate the equipment because too much time can impact the individual's ability to operate that equipment. So that is going to conclude Chapter 13 of the OpenStax Psychology textbook, where we discussed industrial organizational psychology. I'll see you in the next one. I hope you have a great day.